Imagine a world where businesses have the chance to grow, but especially a world where this growth is measured in value, where value includes profits, but also the benefits that these businesses bring to customers and to their employees and to society. Imagine a world where nature is given the space and the time that it much deserves to thrive, where nature, both above land and below the water, is granted the conditions it needs in order not only to sustain itself, but also to produce all the things that we humans need. Imagine a world where commodities are produced sustainably, and where humans ensure that whatever we take from our lands today is replenished enough for us to have plenty tomorrow. My name is Stefano Savi. I'm Italian, and for the past 7 years, I've been in Asia working on sustainability, specifically in agricultural sector. I currently head an organization that brings together many stakeholders from the whole of the natural rubber supply chain, as well as civil society, in a somewhat unusual collaboration. The members of the Global Platform for Sustainable Natural Rubber come from businesses that are competing businesses, as well as from NGOs, and they're working together to understand what does it mean for natural rubber to be sustainable, and how can we produce this sustainable natural rubber and bring it to the market. The point here is that natural rubber is only one of many, many, many key agricultural commodities that we depend on today. The work that we're doing in rubber is very small. There's many others that can contribute to this. Specifically in the agricultural sector, when we look at these commodities, we need to understand that this sector is a sector that for the past 100 years has been based on the assumption that more is more. The more land we clear, the more fertilizers, the more pesticides we applied, the higher our yields will be, and the more the volume of commodities that we can produce, and therefore the more food that we can bring on people's plates, but also the more commodities that we can bring into factories for production. Also, the more will be the profits for the businesses that work in these supply chains. But science is showing us more and more, again, that this paradigm cannot work for long. It cannot work when we don't take only natural rubber or palm oil or another commodity, but when we look at the industry at large, and when we look at these industries working together in a world with finite resources like our world. Science is showing us more and more that the nature's health and the long-term viability of this agricultural sector are very much interconnected. And it will depend on us and how we manage that interconnection and that balance if we want to prevent issues such as displacement due to climate change, or if we want to prevent diseases outbreak, or if we want to prevent the social issues and the fact that populations can be so against industry, so much to undermine the work that the industry is doing in this sector. There's some good news though, and it's not minor good news. The good news is that globally, we already have a framework that describes that future perfect world that I was giving you a hint about before. It's not just a normal framework, it's a framework that has been agreed by 193 countries globally. Many of you will know this. It's called the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. It's a set of 17 goals and now 230 very detailed indicators on how to monitor those goals. Already, of course, many governments are working on this, But not just governments. Also companies, businesses are working to align their strategies to the SDGs. This has been possible mainly because of the work of one actor that none of you would suspect to have played an important role on this, which is financiers, banks and investors. Well, banks and investors have seen and are showing to businesses that sustainability today makes business sense, it makes economic sense to be sustainable. We can see this in research. If we look at the Standard & Poor's 500 companies, for example, we will see that companies that have a sustainability strategy perform much better than others. Let's take climate action, for example, that influences 13 of the 17 SDGs. If we take climate actions and we look at companies that have applied climate actions in the strategy, we can see that those companies have performed up to 18% better financially than the other competitors in the S&Ps. Specifically in the agricultural sector, if you look at companies that have chosen sustainability certification, we have proof that in the past 5 years, for example, in the palm oil sector in Malaysia, companies that have sustainability certification have done 6% better in their investment returns than other competitors. So investing that aims at having environmental, social, and governance criteria into the investment decision is a great way to move businesses away from business as usual into this new paradigm. But unfortunately, it's not enough. The bad news is that we are not yet seeing the global impact of these actions. Let's take inequality, for example. Most of you might have seen the Oxfam reports that was published last year. Today, we have a level in inequality that is unprecedented in the past for our world. This is not only undermining the efforts that we're putting on fighting extreme poverty, but also economic growth itself. Also, when you look at deforestation, it's great to see that certain countries in certain times are decreasing their deforestation rates. But this is unfortunately not a global trend. If we look at what is happening today, if we look at what is happening in Brazil, in other countries, you can see that deforestation is picking up again. It's the same for carbon emissions. CO2 emissions are increasing, and this is exacerbating climate change. So why? Why is this happening? This is happening because we are not moving fast enough. And why are we not moving fast enough? We're not moving fast enough because we're not moving together and we're not moving in the same direction. The issue is that there is still too much reluctance from too many business leaders and businesses to embrace sustainability fully in their business strategies. We are still focusing too much on the do-goods, on the CSR, on one thing here and there to show that I'm behaving sustainably, rather than changing our paradigm. Also, we have too many actors, too many companies, but also too many actors within companies that instead of complying to company policies or to customers' and financiers' demands for sustainability, are instead choosing to move away and feed what are called today the deforestation leakage markets, such as Asia or the Middle East. Most importantly, we are still focusing too much on fighting the negatives, on working on what we can avoid doing that is wrong, while we need to really put an effort in finding incentives, positive incentives for sustainability. So what I would like to talk to you about today is how we can look at this differently. How can we find the solution? And it might be a bit difficult and overarching to achieve it, but I hope that I can instill a seed of this in your minds before you leave today. So if we look at sustainability, the way of looking at this is we need to look at sustainability as a complex social challenge. A complex social challenge. So what does this mean? How do we define a complex social challenge? The first thing is that we need to understand that different actors have different priorities. We should not talk to everyone as if they saw things from our own perspective. We need to understand, for example, that let's look at the SDGs. Yeah? let's look at economic growth while we look at conserving life on land or below water. If we look at this with an old set of eyes, it might be very easy for us to think that these goals are combating or mutually exclusive even, yeah? And if we look at this with an old set of eyes, we might think that there is no solution unless we compromise one goal to make the other better. Also, from a more personal, intimate level, we need to understand that while we will need to have everyone on board to work on the SDGs, not everyone will be moved by a need for harmony and common good and working together in order to achieve this. We will need to understand how can we get on board those that think differently, those that are moved by a need for self-determination to achieve this. And we need to remember that especially in businesses or in position of power, these people will have that drive because that's how they made it there. And we need to find ways that work for these people in order to channel that determination and need for self-determination into something that will benefit the common good. Another thing that we need to understand when we look at complex social challenges is to understand that it's difficult to agree on the details of the plan. So let's take deforestation, for example. We might well agree that in order to stop having carbon emissions or to stop the loss of biodiversity, we will need to stop deforestation. But it's going to be very tricky to get people to agree who will pay for that change. Who will contribute economically to ensure that there is no deforestation? Also, if we agree on this, it will be very difficult at times to understand when to cut or not to cut a single tree. Think about your garden. If someone wanted to come and influence your decision to change your own space. The third, and probably most difficult part, is that there is no Sustainability Handbook. It would be fantastic for me, since I've worked on this for 7 years, if there was an IKEA manual for sustainability. And if sustainability was something that you could do like building an IKEA chair, where you have your set of instructions, you can just make sure that you focus, you sit there, you do it yourself, and you work on it until you complete the task. I can tell you, it would be even okay if sustainability was a difficult challenge, like building a rocket, for example, or a plane. Then what we would have to do is just to ensure that we have the right team, we set everyone on their own task, and ensure that everyone is aligned so that we can complete our goal. But one thing I haven't told you is that I've been a musician for many years before starting working on sustainability. And I've come to realize now that, at least for me, sustainability is a bit like writing a song with your band. When you're there with your band in the rehearsal space and you're not really sure what is going to come up, you might have agreement on certain ideas, you might see what genre you play or what you would like to have on stage, but what you really need to focus on is to take a step back and listen to your bandmates, listen to your ideas, contribute, build on top of those ideas as you reach the final score. So, how can we do this in practice? Yeah? What is the methodology that we can apply? I think there's a set of questions that we can use to ask ourselves these questions when we are into these problems, with type of problems like sustainability. And the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, can we change the situation? Can we change the situation? And most importantly, we need to understand that the answer to this question is just our choice. We can choose to say, well, we cannot change the situation. And then, what we will have to do, at least for those of us who will be able to get there and do this, will be to adapt. Think, for example, of a Blade Runner type of scenario in the future, where there's no more biodiversity left, where there's so much pollution that you cannot see the sun. Well, I'm sure we humans, at least some of us, will be able to adapt to that scenario. If that's what we want for ourselves and for our kids. Myself, I wouldn't want to respond like that. I would want to respond that yes, we can change the situation. We can work on this. And then the second question that we need to ask ourselves is, can we change this situation unilaterally? Can we do it ourselves, like with the IKEA chair? Well, it's obvious that the answer is no. But then some of us might ask ourselves also the question, well, if we cannot do it unilaterally, can we at least influence this situation? Well, I can tell you, having worked on sustainability for so long, that not everyone is going to be on your team, no matter what is the idea that you have for sustainability. So, what is the way forward then? The way forward is what an author that I really like is called Adam Kahan described in his book called Collaborating with the Enemy. And the idea is something that he calls stretched collaboration. So what is stretched collaboration? Stretched collaboration is three things. It's first of all, accepting the plurality of the situation, understanding that the stakeholders that contribute to your complex social challenge are many, and many of them are outside your team, and there's nothing you can do about it. The second thing is we need to experiment on how to move forward. I don't know if any of you have ever taken an improv session class. In improv, there's one rule that I love. It's called the yes and rule. It means that whatever your fellow bandmates or teammates in theater propose, you have to say yes. But not only, you have to say yes and. So accept the idea and build on top of that idea with your contribution. The third thing, and mostly the most difficult thing to do, is to understand that we are also part of the problem, not just part of the solution, and we always tend to think. We are part of the problem, so we need to be very careful of understanding where our failures lie, and be transparent about those failures, talk about those failures, and build on those failures in order to move forward. Yeah? React, reassess, and move forward, right? Assess, react, and move forward. So what does this mean? What does this mean for the actors that are working on sustainability? What does this mean for businesses? What does this mean for the governments? And what does this mean for civil society that are working on this? Well, if I look at businesses, I think businesses have a great opportunity now to understand that helping other businesses that are maybe behaving lower in terms of sustainability credential is a great way to lift the floor up and benefit everyone, including our own business ourselves. It's also an opportunity now for businesses to talk about shortcomings openly. If you look at reports today in businesses, you will see that many businesses are bragging about what they are doing well. But very, very few, I would say no one, I have at least seen no one, is telling us what they did wrong. Where are they failing? And we know that businesses are failing to reach their sustainability targets. Why are we not discussing this more openly? Why don't we show these failures so that others can avoid repeating the same and doing better? Also, we need to ensure that sustainability is at the core of how businesses behave, and that we work on this and experiment on new solutions. And what should governments do? Well, governments can play a big role in ensuring that they're promoting and nurturing avenues and fora for multi-stakeholder dialogue, both within countries and with other governments abroad. They're also in a perfect position today to start collaborating and talking and working with unusual partners, not only governments, on how we can move towards the SDGs. The third and most important thing when we look at governments, in my opinion, is transparency. We need to have governments that promote transparency, because transparency is at the core of what moves political will, and it's also at the core of what can ensure that we have an environment where people can look at data and come up with new ideas and new solutions. Lastly, what can civil society do? Well, civil society should definitely understand what drives businesses that are behaving badly in order to understand what are the causes of those behaviors and act upon them. They should also embrace business and government failures as opportunities for engagement. And we should stop, as civil society, only looking at the negatives, but looking at how we can influence positive change through incentives and positive incentives. So, you all look a bit puzzled, and you might think, okay, so is it only for businesses, for governments, and for civil society to do something, or do I also have a role to play? Well, I think everyone has a role to play today. If we look at our society, and we look at nationalism, we look at politics, we can see that we have a system that pushes us to be far away from people that talk or think or behave differently from us. Take social media, for example. You have all signed up to policies and to settings on your social media that feed you with the content that is good for you because it's similar to what you think, that link you up with people that only think like yourselves. Nelson Mandela, and I'm citing Nelson Mandela because I think he was one of the first who, maybe without knowing the term, looked at stretch collaboration. Well, he said in Durban in 1990, those who approach problems with intolerant attitudes are no credit for the struggle. They actively endanger our future. They actively endanger our future. So let's try and look proactively for people that talk and think and behave differently from us. Let's do so to ask the question, what drives their motivation? Why don't they think like me? What drives their behavior? What is the root cause of this opinion that I have in front of me? So let's all try and make an effort to step in the conversation with others that don't think like us. Let's do so not to change our mind and their mind, as we tend to think in the first 5 minutes of every conversation that we have with someone like this. But let's do so to understand them better, so that we can find solutions that work for them towards our common goals. Let's do so because in our little boat that we call Earth, we will soon find that them, it's us, and us is them. Thank you.